Right.
But hopefully the country is moving in the correct direction. So I'm just an optimist. I mean, can't help it.
This guy is in some ways, I'm going to have to tell you, if you look at his history, this guy Scott Brown, he's kind of a creepy character.
Oh, no, he posed nude. Oh, he guy's gross.
And
he's a perv.
Yeah.
All of y'all have a copy of it, don't you?
Well, I was concerned with the first time I saw him, he was seeing somebody's daughter. She was right there.
Right.
That
Oh,
was.
yeah.
Oh, no.
Well,
That was strange.
That was a little off page.
You know, I'm not going to accuse the guy of anything, but some of the pictures I've seen, and then this thing with him posing nude, he kind of creeps you out.
Well, and the thing about health care, you got to remember, see, it had already passed the Senate, and what they forced upon the House was the Senate version. Remember, it was called reconciliation. They had to vote on the Senate bill, and then they came back and they refined it. And so it was a tricky maneuver that really should never have been done. And it was, the Democrats did the impossible, really. It should have been dead.
Should have been doesn't count.
Should have been. But, you know, again,
could have been, would have been.
Look at the one vote in the Senate, the one vote in the House, so many one votes. And so if we can just get that one more person in House and Congress.
But the fact is, the bottom line is, the health care passed, and now we're stuck with this guy. And we're going to be fighting him. And he's going to be harder to fight than Ted Kennedy because people around the country all knew what Ted Kennedy was.
But just as Pastor Clenard Childress likes to say, these people have awakened the sleeping giant. And we don't know, like you said, it's not a done deal in November, but you know what? The pro-life movement is more energized than I've seen in a long time.
You're absolutely right. We're winning, and you know, even the pro-aborts are saying this.
They're crying, even though they got Obama and health care and everything else they've always wanted.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Well, I've been studying this article for a while. This girl wrote anonymously, and she claims to be a writer, but she's writing about her experience when, in March, Obama privately signed away what she says women's rights, but it was when he signed no federal funds can pay for abortions. Remember that?
The executive order.
Yeah, and I always thought, why did he have to go behind closed doors and no cameras? And that's a whole nother deal, I'm sure. But anyway, she's saying how the day before he did that she had an abortion. And the procedure was $450, and she's pretty angry that the government didn't pay for it. For her abortion.
No. She's angry that you and I and Johnny and Troy didn't pay for her abortion.
Yeah, exactly.
The government doesn't have money. The only money the government has is money they take from us. So
that's right.
Let's make sure she understands that.
Right. You know, I don't think we could get through to her because if she is someone that she's in her mid-30s, and she talks about how she's watching her biological clock tick and how much she wants a child. Well, she has this,
She has a child.
I know. I'm going.
Wait a minute, Johnny. Just let her go.
I know. See, why don't people get this? We get it. Are we the only ones that get it? But anyway, how much she wants a child, her biological clock is ticking. Well, she has some casual sex with an ex-boyfriend, and lo and behold, she gets pregnant.
And we're supposed to pay for that.
And but it's not the right time to have a baby, and. She doesn't want this guy who she's just friends with now to have all this guilt and all that, so she aborts the baby. But what she's writing about is her pain and how much, first of all, her physical pain, and then she even goes on to talk about how she feels damaged and guilty, but she would do it again. If she wants a baby, she gets pregnant, she aborts, she feels guilty, and she would do it again. You know, so how do you even
these women
reason with these
have
people?
Been sold a bill of goods for the last 40 years, and it has so screwed up a large percentage of women in this country and men, because the men are now of the opinion, and we see this time and time again. A guy, if you had gone to this guy who got this girl pregnant, it's casual sex that we're supposed to all pay for her casual sex.
Say, he was ready to help support the child.
Okay.
You know, yeah.
All right. But in most cases, if you go to these guys and they say, well, I'll help you pay for the abortion. If she says, no, I don't want to have an abortion, his attitude is, okay, I did my part. I stepped up to the plate. I was willing to pay for half the abortion. I'd even given you a ride to the clinic, and waited outside and took you back home.
I am, right?
Yeah. But male responsibility now has become so devalued, just like women had to value their own ability to have children. It's now considered a burden as opposed to a gift. but we've devalued women's views of themselves, and we've devalued men's views of what responsibility means.
Not to mention the life inside. But also she talks about that she's in Texas where this happened, and she said how we've passed the Women's Right to Know Act, and she was required to listen to a recording of where the baby was developmentally, and how much she resented that, and she had to hear it, and this man's voice was talking about it, and what does he know, and all that, and she even went through a cluster of female pro-lifers, quote unquote, that accosted me in the parking lot when I arrived, and the receptionist calls it harassment. But when she gets inside, in contrast to the harassment and those awful pro-life people out there who are trying to get her to not do this and hopefully reason with her, then she says the nurses and counselors at the clinic were as kind as any group of strangers I have ever seen.
Well, yeah, you're paying them. You're paying them to be kind. You can hire all kinds of people to be.
Customer.
Right.
The disconnect is clear, Mark, and that's because we started this show off here talking about the failure of the church. Right. The Bible's clear where there's no vision, the people perish. Why does she feel guilty and then happy and sad and all these different feelings? Is because there's no clarion call from the pulpits of America. The pulpits of America are required to speak the whole counsel of God. And when they lose that, when they're a Joel Osteen, just feel good, touchy-feely, then there's going to be pain and dyslexia and moral failure.
Right. And it's schizophrenia.
That's what this is. They're schizophrenic because there's not a clear call. Right. The pulpit's not thundering the truth of God. And until they do that...
Well, we're going to talk about that in the next segment, but...
I just had no words. It was just one contradiction after the other, and the bitterness and the anger, and so what if I don't want a baby now? And, I'm going, well, you have a baby now, and...
I'm brokenhearted for her.
It's her pain is just starting.
Not only that, you're right. That's what I was saying. This woman is screwed up forever.
She's
her worst enemy.
She went in knowing. I've known hundreds of women who were like me that knew nothing about anything. It was like getting a flu shot. And then there's women that see sonograms. They're told everything. They know everything. They do it anyway. They want to die immediately after it's over. And she did.
Hey,
she knows everything.
On our 800 line, I've talked to women that have called me and said, "Oh yeah, I had an abortion." No. And I'll say, well, have you been pregnant before? Have you had prior babies or abortions? Oh, yeah, I've got 3 children. They know, and they'll say, I knew it was a baby, but this is what I wanted to do. It solved a problem at the time, and now I've got all these other problems, but, solved the problem that was in front of me. No long-term thought.
And I'm not a baby killer, she says.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, what is she?
Okay, well,
she's denying it.
You can call whatever you want to, but the baby's dead, and you're now the mother of the dead child.
You may not have killed it, but you hired the person who killed it. You hired a contract killer.
And if I hired somebody to kill you, I'd go to jail too, right?
Right. Well, maybe not me, but maybe somebody else out there.
Yeah.
Now let's check in with Father Frank and Janet.
Thanks, Mark, and LifeTalk friends, it's always good to be with you. This is, again, an election year, and Janet and I are going to talk a little bit about that. Janet, some people are tired of politics. Others can't wait to get involved again because they feel maybe the political wind is a little bit more in our direction this time around. But, the pro-life movement has had ups and downs with various elections in terms of how it impacts our movement. And yet I always say the great thing about elections is there's always another one. So if one doesn't go so well, you always look ahead and you say, how can we re-energize, how can we remobilize, and make an impact in the voting booth? Because, if we're defending life, let's look at this first from a broad perspective. We know this is the most important issue that there is. We know that if we don't get this issue resolved, it's going to destroy the whole nation. And so we've got to come at it from many different directions, many different angles to the goal of ending abortion. No one of those angles is the only one. No one of them has the only promise. So the last thing we would ever say is that the ultimate solution to the abortion problem is political. We don't believe in political saviors. We don't believe in politics as the ultimate answer to anything. But at the same time, when we step back and we say, well, because ending abortion is so urgent, because we can leave no stone unturned, because we have to push on every front, well, then the political is included in that. It's included as part of the picture. We have to get the right kind of people in public office, and we have to get candidates aware of the fact that their first responsibility is to protect human rights. and that they have no right to veto human rights.
That's right. And you know, Father, who's in office does matter. And we know there's a lot of efforts going on now in the states, all right, to pass women's right to know laws, informed consent laws, different aspects like that, which do make a difference. We know they help reduce abortion.
Well, yes.
And who is in your state legislature matters.
Yes, it matters.
Because it matters whether that bill sees the light of day. And also on the federal level, it matters. Who are your congressmen? Who are your senators? So much is at stake, from nominations to not just the Supreme Court, but the federal courts, so forth and so on. And so for this election, what we want to urge our LifeTalk audience is, let's leave no stone unturned. Let's make sure all your friends and relatives who are of like mind are registered to vote. Very simple activity. Register to vote. And don't assume they are. Don't assume because, they're with us. Oh, yeah, we pray in front of the abortion mill together. Of course they're registered to vote. Don't assume that. We know, Father, one time we checked some of our own list and we found out a certain percentage of our Peaceful Life family wasn't registered to vote.
Well, and we're not the only group. A number of groups have done that. And again, these are people on the list actively seeking pro-life information and coming to events and whatnot. And sometimes upward of 30, 40% on the list of various pro-life organizations turn up to be not registered. Now, sometimes that happens when people move.
Exactly.
They move and then they just forget to re-register in their new district. But this is why we're reminding them now, and reminding our LifeTalk audience, go out and remind them for this year's election too. And a lot of the voter registration deadlines are coming up very soon. That's right. In each state, the registration deadline is different for the primary elections and also for the general election, which this year is November the 2nd. The voter registration deadlines come sometime prior to that. A lot of them come up starting in September, the deadlines for the general election. So now's the time to be doing voter registration drives.
And to help everyone do that, we're focusing on some particular Sundays, starting with in July. It's the weekend of